Okay, I'll get started. We already have 120 folks here, which is amazing. We had almost 400 people signed up today, so we know many more will be watching a recording of this later, which we'll share with everyone who's registered, and we'll make sure that's available online so you can share it with your friends, share it with your family. Um, yeah, I'm going to go over a few Zoom logistics. Today's webinar will run for about 2 hours. So again, we're recording. We'll send out an email with the link. And any resources that are shared today from our panelists or by us in the chat, we'll make sure that we also send those to you afterwards. Please use the chat throughout to post comments or questions or resources or share your own experiences with breaking up with banks and with different credit unions. Use the chat as a way to connect, especially if you're somewhere where it might help to connect with other people who are also breaking up with their bank and looking at local credit unions. Check out who's in your area. Captions are enabled, so please click the CC live transcript button to enable Zoom captions if you want them. If you don't see that button, you might have to click the three dots in the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen to find the captions setting. And a reminder that the captions are auto-generated by robots, so please excuse any errors with the live transcription. Okay. So I'm going to get us started with a land acknowledgement. We're all gathering virtually here today from different territories across Turtle Island. I'm personally coming to you from Tiggerundo, which is colonially known as Toronto. This land has been stewarded and cared for by many nations, including the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples. It's governed by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty or Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement between the Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee confederacies and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the land around the Great Lakes. The most recent treaty holders are the Mississaugas of the Credit, who signed Treaty 13, which has been shamefully violated, misrepresented, and the Mississaugas' rights undermined by the colonial governments of Britain and then Canada. So we can't just acknowledge this. We must call out the ongoing occupation and destruction of Indigenous lands and genocidal violence towards Indigenous peoples here and in Palestine and around the world, which the Canadian state and the banks that we'll be talking about today are actively promoting, financing, and benefiting from. We must look at ourselves, especially those of us who benefit from the existence of the Canadian state, and ask what we can do to support resistance to colonialism. So in our campaign and in our discussion today, we aim to make connections between militarism, colonialism, and climate disaster. We know that settler-led divestment work has often failed to make those connections. So today, let's try to hold all of these commitments as intimately interconnected. We encourage you to reflect on whose land you are on and how your own accountability to those nations can inform the ways you show up for this divestment and reinvestment work. If you don't know whose land you're on, we're dropping a link in the chat right now for you to learn and to find out and learn more about the territories you're on. So when we start to look at our personal finances, something we've noticed is we get a bigger picture of where we are materially located within systems of oppression. We see how often without our consent, our finances are tied up in industries and practices that are incredibly violent to humans and non-humans and this earth that we all rely on. So with what you learned today from our speakers and the resources we'll share during and after the webinar, we hope you'll feel empowered to use your anti-war and anti-colonial ethics and your care for a collective future for all on this planet to guide where and how you divest and reinvest your money. So in line with this call, we really want to highlight that Fossil Fools Day is coming up. It's on April 6th, and there's actions happening across the country to stand in solidarity with Indigenous land defenders resisting projects funded by RBC. We'll drop a link in the chat where you can find an action near you and sign up. We'll also drop a link to a recent webinar hosted by Decolonial Solidarity, in which Indigenous organizers and land defenders, including one of our very own panelists today, Yves Saint, educate about RBC's violation of Indigenous rights, particularly on Wet'suwet'en territory and in Palestine. So we really encourage you to pair that webinar with today's webinar to get a fuller picture of the importance of divestment work in combating settler colonialism. So now I'll share a little bit about who your hosts are and our campaign. My name is Franklin, and I'm a member of World Beyond War's Toronto chapter. We are a grassroots group of anti-war activists who organize and mobilize people to act against Canadian military violence everywhere in solidarity with people on the front lines of war and colonial violence. We just relaunched our chapter in the fall, and we've been primarily organizing alongside many others against Canada's support, arming, and funding of Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Our Break Up With Your Bank campaign is a response to calls we've heard from Palestinians to remove our money from banks financing this genocide and the ongoing occupation. But many of us realized as we started to try to do that it can be pretty overwhelming to figure out how to move your accounts, choose a new credit union, what do you do with your loans, your investments, and it can get pretty complicated quickly, especially if you're doing it on your own. And we heard from a lot of folks who registered from today's webinar that what you're really looking for is just some support and collectivity in taking this on. So our campaign really aims to bring together a lot of existing resources and a few new ones to make this process easier. So what are we asking you to do? If you go to our webpage, which we're going to drop in the chat right now, you'll find a pledge that you can sign to break up with your bank. We're asking you to move your money from Canada's big five banks and their subsidiaries, which includes smaller banks like Tangerine and Simply Financial, with the ultimate goal of closing your account and reinvesting in more ethical alternatives, such as credit unions. This pledge helps us track and show the collective impact of personal divestment. And if you opt into emails from us, we can keep you connected to resources as we grow this campaign, respond to the needs we're hearing, and then support new members of credit unions to connect with one another for continued organizing. So personal divestment is an important aspect of larger divestment work because it tells banks that their practices are unacceptable to us. When we make it known that we won't stand for genocidal investments, they start to worry about their image and their bottom line. So we need to tell them why we're leaving or even why we're thinking of leaving. So on our webpage, you'll find a link to some breakup email templates that you can use to do this. Like many divestment campaigns, we're recommending member-owned credit unions, also known as Caisse Populaires in Quebec, as a more ethical alternative for your banking, and you'll hear more today about why that is. But even if you can't move all of your finances to a credit union right now, opening that new account and becoming a member is a powerful first step you can take. Our webpage includes some resources to help you assess what credit union is right for you, and you'll hear more about how to do that today as well. We also have a list on our webpage of databases that you can use to check whether the funds that you're invested in or considering investing in are tied to militarism, occupation, and fossil fuels. So please also check those out. So today we'll hear from our panelists about some specific unethical investments that banks in so-called Canada are making, particularly around projects like pipelines violating Indigenous rights here on Turtle Island, and in the weapons companies arming Israel and supporting its illegal settlements. But I also want to remind ourselves that banks' financing of war, occupation, and climate destruction is far more than we can begin to cover in this webinar today. Banks work to maximize their profits, so that's what they care about, and it's not surprising that in a capitalist system, in a state that relies on settler colonialism and imperialism, that this is the case. So I'm going to quickly highlight a few stats just to give a sense of this broader picture. Since Canadian banks signed the Paris Climate Agreement in 2016, they've become 5 of the 6 largest global financiers of the tar sands. This amounts to over $1 trillion in investments, and that keeps increasing every year. These tar sands extractions violate Indigenous rights, and they cause devastating health impacts in ecocide. And then across the globe, Canadian banks are major financiers of mining projects, paper mills, palm oil producers, and other companies causing rampant deforestation while violating human rights and especially Indigenous rights. The financing of military violence by Canadian banks runs wide and deep. You've all probably heard by now of Scotiabank's shameful $500 million investment in Elbit Systems, which is Israel's largest military producer. This was recently cut to about $400 million stake, and that reduction followed months of ongoing pressure from Palestine solidarity groups. So we do see and we know that pressure is working, and we have to keep that pressure up for a total divestment. BMO also retains a $90 million investment in Elbit. In fact, all big five banks are heavily invested in weapons companies arming Israel, such as Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, Palantir, Jacobs Engineering, Lockheed Martin, L3Harris, Bechtel, Honeywell, and I could keep going. And of course, the same weapons and military surveillance companies that are arming Israel also arm violence and policing across the globe, including here. Canada is also the fifth highest investing country in nuclear weapons producing companies, with over 27 billion US dollars in investments. And the big banks are among the highest investors in that figure. And I'm not sure if we'll touch on the big five banks' substantial financing of prison and immigration detention companies today, but that's another major axis of human rights violations. So our goal isn't just to encourage you to divest, but also to start to form a greater critical consciousness around our finances. While this campaign is focused on personal divestment, we hope it provides a pathway to advocating at institutions, including your new credit union, to stop financing violence to humans and the land. Imagine if thousands of Canadians switched to credit unions and became thousands of members advocating for divestment from militarism, occupation, incarceration, and fossil fuels, and reinvesting in community. Imagine if everyone, all of us, followed the boycott, sanction, and divestment movement's calls. We know that this works when enough people are in it together. So thank you for listening to this intro and learning more about our campaign. Now I want to turn our focus to our panelists. We're so grateful that you've each taken time to be here with us today and share your knowledge. And I also want to thank everyone who registered and shared your questions. The questions that I'm asking today have all been crowdsourced from you. If you have further questions that come up during the discussion, please do drop them in the chat. We will record them. We'll try to add more questions at the end if we have time. And if not, we're going to try to follow up more with as many resources as we can. Unfortunately, one of our original panelists, Vanessa Gray, was unable to join us today. And since Vanessa was going to speak to the divestment work of Indigenous climate action, I just want to highlight a webinar that they put on a couple years ago that's available online on their website, and we're dropping a link to that in the chat. It's a really great chance to learn about the ways that Indigenous peoples are leading the fight against climate change by putting pressure on governments, banks, insurance companies, and other corporations to divest from fossil fuel projects. So please do check that webinar out and check out the website of Indigenous Climate Action. So in lieu of Vanessa, we're so grateful to have Eve Saint here today, who's ready to step in. I'm just going to check in if, I know Eve is also juggling childcare today, if she's here and if it's a good time or if we'll go to another speaker. Yes, amazing. Hi, Eve.
Hi. Yeah, I am available. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Eve stepped in last minute. We're hugely grateful to have you. So Eve is a Wet'suwet'en land defender and the divestment lead for the Gidimt'en checkpoint. Eve, do you want to start by introducing yourself any further in any way you want and telling us about the divestment work that you're involved in?
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thank you for thinking of me and reaching out. Yes, I may get interrupted. I have two toddlers. One is feeling a little under the weather. So there may be some interruptions. I apologize in advance. So yes, hi everyone. I'm Eve Saint. I'm a Wet'suwet'en land defender. I'm one of the land defenders who was arrested February 7th, 2020, defending my father's territory at Gidimt'en checkpoint. And I just wanted to kind of just kind of introduce how I came into the world of divestment. So I'm a divestment campaigner for Get 'em Done Checkpoint. And I've been doing this work since 2021. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into because I was like, I'm a land defender. I usually, I'm on the front lines. I'm doing support work. You know, I'm good at public speaking or, getting the story out there. So, when Slato came to me and offered me the position, I was just like really kind of overwhelmed, a little bit nervous, scared because I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea about banks. I have no, hold on. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I was like nervous because I didn't know like any financial like jargon. I'm like, oh my God, am I gonna have to like talk to these people who are like, these CEOs or like, they're gonna look at me. I'm, got like, the warrior like, look. I got, A-cap shirts, they're not gonna listen to me. But I was pretty much doing it anyway. I was doing the work anyway, like being out on the front line, stopping the projects like CGL, costing them money, and organizing, mobilizing people. Like I was like, wow, once I started like, learning what it is to work in divestment and pressure investors. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing this already. And I didn't need to have to like learn all this, financial jargon. And so it's been very rewarding. It's also um, it's also really hard because like being an Indigenous person and being a land defender, like, Indigenous people have really feel the weight of colonization, right? Like, a lot of us are homeless. A lot of us are struggling with like mental health issues like depression, alcoholism, substance abuse, like just, you name it, we're facing it. We struggle every day. And it's not easy to, go the front line as well or do this work because, now we have, it's coming from all different angles, right? Like we're trying to live day to day and then also like during work, this my job and, being in this frame of mind, it's a bit of a struggle. And we're very thankful when people stand in solidarity with us, when people throw down with us, because, a lot of time we get burnt out, we have a lot, there's a small number of us that stand up, that, show up and organize or rally or, even believe in climate change, like a lot of people like deny it or, they don't know, even, in some cases, they don't know the real history of Canada, right? So they're racist towards Indigenous people. So coming into this work, it takes a toll. Slato, Molly Wickham, oh my God, such a shiro of mine because like Freda, they've been doing this for like decades, right? And they really sacrificed a lot of their life, and I just admire them. So I really wanted to help any way that I could. And, looking back at all the work that I've done so far, in the past 3 years in this position, you know, it's a lot, right? I don't give myself enough credit because, like, you know, um, yeah, I remember just meeting with Slato recently and we were kind of going over our work plan and our work goals. And, like I'm just seeing all the work that we've done and I've done. And I'm like, oh my God, wow. Like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot when we did that. Like it's, yeah, we're out there pressuring investors. And then also, mind you, we had like blockades every year. So we had, it was pretty intense. It was pretty intense because, like, we had, pressuring investors, and then we also had blockades that, was happening and trying to get people to the front lines or trying to get people to, push on the outside because of that helped. When I got arrested and then we saw shut down Canada, like that really helped, right? Like that. Those actions really brought Canada, so-called Canada, the so-called leaders to the table to sit down with Chief Wass. Chief Wass is my dad. And so CGL, Canada, the leaders, they didn't want to sit down with us because they don't view us as human. They don't view us as, like anyone that they should be talking to. Like, they think that they just see dollar signs. They see us as in the way, right? From them stealing resources, from them stealing our lands, our resources. Like they don't have to worry about like, drinking dirty water or, being harassed by RCMP or anything like that, right? They just get to enjoy the millions and billions of dollars that, these stolen lands provides them. Um, but anywho, so yeah, just we keep up the pressure, especially with the banks. So like I work with a network of people who work in different NGOs like Greenpeace, Stand Earth, Banking on a Better Future, Future for Our Kids, etc. And yeah, we come together and we, especially with AGM season, we kind of get to pressure. We decide to target RBC. So you see a lot of like, campaigning against RBC. That's us. And so last year was the first AGM that I was a part of and experienced. And oh my God, it was so crazy. Like, okay, so yeah, it was in Saskatoon and we had like different land defenders from, all across Turtle Island come stand with us and support. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And, it took a lot of work. And, we had a whole team make it happen. And it was just so powerful. And so when we got to our RBC, like the hotel where the AGM was at, like we had like RCMP block us at the door and tell us that we're not allowed in the main room. And we were just like we were dumbfounded. We were shocked. We're like, what? like we have proxies, like we're not here to like, shut it down, even though we should have. We should have, but we were there. We wanted to be heard. Right. We went with the message. It's not like we're going to be rowdy, Of course, I could see why they're scared of us because we kind of, you know, we do make noise. But no, like we're gonna, go and be like, hey, we had messages and we were stopped and they would not allow us like past. Chief Namox went to go past and, even go look at the room. And like, he was grabbed. And then, I was like, hey, what are you doing? Like, oh, hands off. And I went live and I was just like, rah, rah, rah. And, then I got at one point, it was kind of people shoving here, shoving out, shoving everywhere. And then I kind of got a little bit pushed into the RCMP, and the RCMP just like shoved me back. I was just like, oh my God, like really? And then like our little auntie who's like 5 foot and uses needs help walking, like she was grabbed by her arm. And like it was just like, are you serious? Like this is what we're met with, this is what we experience. Like, we're treated like dogs. We're like dehumanized. It's not like we're gonna go there and like, we just wanted our voices to be heard. And so they put us in another room. Like at this point, like, some people are like, I don't even want to talk. Like, I don't even want, to, do it by their what do you call it, like their way, right? Like they felt degraded. And I'm like, I feel you, but we've organized so long and people have traveled so far. Like we need these people to hear our message. And so yeah, we went in the room and we all had messages and they're so strong. Like, they're like, yeah, like this is what you fund. You fund like militarized RCMP going on indigenous lands and ripping women off by gunpoint. Like you're going to keep on investing in? Or like, CGL doesn't have proper FPIC, right? Making a lot of your projects illegal. Is this what you're going to keep on investing in? And so on and so forth. And, Dave Mackay would not even answer any of it. And he just shut us down. Like he's just like, I'm not answering any of this. And so this is why we targeted RBC, because they are stubborn and they tend to be, like the most stubborn and the most they call themselves a climate leader. BS. Um, but like they tend to what they do, the other banks kind of tend to follow suit, apparently. Um, and anywho, so that's why we kind of chose RBC. And this is just a great example of how they like treat Indigenous people, and all their investments are violating like our rights. They do not have proper FPIC and they don't acknowledge that. And a lot of projects go through Indigenous lands. And, even though, a lot of places or, countries or even Canada says, yeah, they respect UNDRIP, like not everywhere in Canada, obviously, but, that's not the case. That's not true. Like I'm still hearing for upcoming projects, um, people are coming to me and saying, there's a project coming and nobody in my community knows about it. And our leaders are there. And so their leaders, Chief and Council of the Reserve, they are not, they are systematically there, put there by the government. So it's already like it's an oppressed structure. And, of course, like chief and council are, just motivated to obviously better their community, which I get, right? Obviously, we shouldn't be living in poverty. We shouldn't, especially Indigenous people, we had everything stolen from us. Like, what the F, right? Like, So, I understand that. I understand both sides, right? But when you do it sneakily, and you don't get like, the proper, consultation of the community members, and, that's endangering their lives, right? Like they're the people that have to live there. They're the people that have to drink the water. They're the people that have to like, feel the impacts because all the salmon are like depleting from the rivers, or the animals aren't there anymore like they used to because industry chased them away or killed them, or and that's what these projects bring. Their impacts are very you know um what's the word, like it's almost like dire. It is like very the impacts are very almost extreme, just because like it impacts us in a lot of different ways, right? They impact the water, they pollute the water, they don't properly, all their spills or like, tailing ponds, or, like they don't properly clean that up. They don't get any proper, anyone holding them accountable to clean up after themselves. We have if there's any resistance, there's injunctions that restrict us from moving freely on our lands. We'll see that with Wet'suwet'en. My family or the people cannot hunt or fish or trap without like RCMP being like 2 feet away from them. Um, and they're usually stopped. Oh, geez, it was being out there. Like the police presence was just so brutal. Like the people would be stalked and hunted and mocked, and like it was just disgusting. Like nobody should live like that. And then also like the workers building or extracting these projects, you have man camps, and that comes with like, hundreds of racist, um, hetero, straight, white men who, like have a history of viewing Indigenous people as disposable, as subhuman. And, that brings a lot of violence with missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit. And then also that brings like an increase of like drugs through communities and alcoholism. And yeah, so it's, these projects are pretty damaging. And yeah, going back to the AGM, so it's going to be very interesting on what's going to happen this year. Like, RBC claims to be, they throw around reconciliation. They throw around, just like, oh, we're leaders of climate. BS, right? Like, I'm part of a group that put forward a complaint at the Competition Bureau to, exactly that. Like, they're greenwashing and they're like misleading, and so like we want them to stop, and they're not meeting any of the requirements that they promised, and like they're investing more, like billions into more fossil fuels or like extraction projects, and like they need to stop advertising that. So we're just like in the process of that. And same with Indigenous rights. Like, they claim this and that, but the way they treat us, and that's just this part of the world. Like, I was a part of a rally. There was a mining awards. Like there's a mining gathering here in Toronto recently. And so I was helping out with the rally outside of the Royal Fairmont. And there's like speakers all over the world, and they had like the same message. There's a lot of people like, dying in their communities because of these projects. A lot of children and like there has been no proper FPIC and there's been like an increase of criminal activity like from criminal like mafias, I guess, or like criminal organizations. RBC and all these banks, that's what they're invested in, right? And they are not going to see us as, human beings. They're not going to see us as human beings until our life is as valuable as their projects, right? If our life gives them the same amount of dollars as these projects, then that's where, like we will be heard. So I remember hearing that from the UN Special Rapporteur one year when Standing Rock was happening and they were getting brutalized down there. And the Special Rapporteur said that human life will have to be as valuable as this pipeline. And so that's where, when after I did, I know I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I know, baby. She's been so patient. Okay, I'll be right there, okay? Almost done. Okay. Um, uh, okay. Yeah. The special repertoire. Oh yeah. Okay. Where I was going was when I was arrested February 7th. I was, speaking here and there, it was a pretty busy time because, Shutdown Canada was happening. And I was doing a talk with Yellowhead at Metropolitan Toronto. Yeah, I'm trying to get the name. University X or something. Anyway, there's a professor there, a lawyer, like she teaches law, and oh, thank you for your, for your action or what you did. And I was just like, what? Like, yeah, yeah, for sure. But like, she's just like, no, we need actions like that because we need the laws to change. And if this doesn't happen, no laws will change. Like, I got what she meant. It kind of like clicked in, and I was like, oh, yeah, 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 no. And that's where it kind of brought me back to what the special rapporteur was saying. And I kind of say this in my talks too, as well, is yeah, I am kind of saying break the law. You kind of got to because, the law is there to kind of keep us in this box, right? But who's holding the banks, governments and um, banks, governments, and industry accountable? Nobody. Nobody. They go from like position to position and within each other's like category. Um I sometimes my words I'm this um time in the evening, I'm kind of mom brain kicks in, but yeah, they kind of go within each other anyway. They don't nobody holds them accountable. And this is where like I really like to like, pressure people or like, do a call of action, come show up. It does matter. Your voice does matter. You showing up does matter. Um, because like how we saw with Shutdown Canada, like we saw the power in that. We are seeing the power now with people showing up for Palestine, with what's going on now. Like we're seeing it worldwide and keep showing up, to all these injustices because it does matter. It may feel like it's not, it is. since I've started this work, I've been noticing, or we've been hearing that, yeah, RBC is afraid. They are afraid and they, get worried a couple times. They're like, can you stop? And we're just like, no. So, the pressure is working, and I know sometimes it feels like it's not, but it really does. And continue to, you know, um, stand in solidarity with Indigenous people because, we're tired. It's hard work, and we face like, intergenerational trauma and colonialism, and you know, that hasn't ended for us. We're still feeling the effects from it, and we're still trying to fight. That's why you don't see a big number of us out there because, a lot of us are still just trying to survive, right? But we are waking up. I get more and more, I get bit, people come to me here and there, Indigenous people being like, I want to stop this in my community. And I love hearing that. I love hearing that because I'm like, you came to the right person. Let's do something. Like, let's go. Um, but yes, like with switching with credit unions, I don't have too much to offer right there. Maybe somebody on the other panelist may have, but I kind of just wanted to share that little bit with you. I don't want to take up too much more time. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Eve, that for very powerful words reminding us why it's so important that people show up for this work. And thank you for giving those insights on the experience of the front lines of divestment work is so interconnected to that land defense and that water defense work. Thank you for painting that very clear picture for everyone. And for telling us about how the last AGM went, which should tell everyone how important it is to show up to support this upcoming AGM in a few weeks.
Yeah,
So
yeah, April 11th and then April 6th. Look out or attend if there's any Fossil Fools Day event happening in your area, or look to Decolonial Solidarity if you would like to organize one. Mhm.
yes, thank you. Yeah, we plugged their webinar earlier in their website. So yeah, lots of actions happening. If people want to step up and organize one or join one. I think is the AGM in Etobicoke on the 11th?
Yes, I believe so. Yep, it's the Congress. Oh, geez, I forget the. It's near the airport.
Okay, yeah,
Convention Center. I don't know, somewhere, but we will let folks know. Keep an eye out, and the information will be out soon. Mhm.
absolutely great. So besides Decolonial Solidarity, do you have any like last minute recommendations on where else people could follow to keep up with your work?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, like through social media, like we have, Get 'em Done Checkpoint, Yinta Access on IG or on X. It's not Twitter anymore. And then like ICA, like we'll be having, some events around the AGM out. And but mostly with the Get 'em Done divestment, yeah, through Get 'em Done socials. And yeah, we usually work like close with like Stand and Greenpeace and like other orgs like that. So yeah, we're usually floating around around the social media world.
Amazing. Thank you, Eve. We'll follow up with folks, giving them those links and connections so it's easy to find. And thank your babies from us for letting us borrow you. We know you have to get back to them, but thank you for yeah, giving us so much of your time today.
Yeah, yeah, thanks everyone. All right. I'm gonna jump off just because I'm gonna go. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks. Bye.
thank you. Um, I also really appreciated that I saw a lot of like education happening in the chat around terms that might be new to some folks, like UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, and I forget the FIPIC, free, prior, and informed consent. I know some people were asking about those acronyms, so we can also follow up with some resources to learn more if those are new to you. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn over to Karen Rodman now. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see you again.
Pleasure.
Karen, yeah, Karen Rodman's the executive director of Just Peace Advocates, which is also a member of the Canadian BDS Coalition. That's how we got in touch. So, Karen, do you want to start just by introducing anything about yourself you want to share and tell us about the divestment work that you do?
Sure. Well, thank you. What an honor to be part of this group and to represent the Canadian BDS Coalition, which is about 20 some organizations from across Canada, right from Newfoundland to Vancouver Island and places in between. We've been working together for about 8 years as a coalition and have done work related to boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and other work supporting Palestine and other anti-imperial types of work. Just Peace Advocates are my own organization, or the organization that I'm part of, I should say, has had more of a focus on research and campaigns and quasi-legal work to support things such as the accountability and sort of following the money and other legal accountability. So that's kind of who we are. In terms of some of the work we've done for the last 4 or 5 years, we have focused on the Canada Pension Plan, which is about $10 billion invested in Israeli war crimes. The last couple of years, we have followed and done the research related to the Quebec Pension Plan, which has more than $12 billion. And then more recently, we have done work with some of the analysis around for Ontario public and broader public sector pensions, as well as the BC one. And they have a couple $1 billion as well. So in many cases, it's only a small percentage, like even a 0.1% of the actual investments of these total portfolios, especially with the public and broader public sector pensions that are invested in what would be considered war crimes, apartheid, or work that would be supporting perhaps then the Israeli military, and in this current context, then accountability towards even perhaps genocide. So it's usually a very small percentage that should make it easier to divest. In terms of banking, we followed starting back 5-7 years ago some of the results coming out of BankTrack. We can put some of these links into the chat after I'm done speaking. I'm not sure I can multitask well enough to do that at the same time, but and did that follow up in terms of accountability. Probably the first campaign we did was around Palantir and the Royal Bank a few years ago. And that, of course, is basically a surveillance high-tech company that's involved in all kinds of things related to prisons and walls and other things, and certainly factors around identity and security within the checkpoint systems and the security systems and monitoring for Palestine. So certainly our solidarity with the work that Eve's been just talking about in terms of solidarity with our own settler roots in terms of being with Indigenous folks, as that campaign has come together from Wet'suwet'en and land back defenders over the last couple of years is important, and reasons for. I know we had a small presence last year at the AGM in Saskatoon, but we probably need to have a much bigger one this year for sure in Toronto. And I think that will happen organically by many groups, not just those that are part of the Canadian BDS Coalition. Of course, the Scotiabank and shut down Elbit, shame on Scotiabank, has been a really big focus of the Canadian BDS Coalition, especially our friends in Vancouver, but right across the country, and picked up by many groups, as you've already mentioned. I think there were about 30 branches where there were actions last week, and at least 6 or so that were closed down, or at least partially, for some time. And of course, you've already mentioned that there's been some impact on the investment investment levels there. So certainly that is an important and tactical campaign of the coalition. We've also done a fair amount of work related to Canadian charities and charities that are using our tax subsidized dollars to support illegal settlements in Palestine and the Israeli military. So that would be another example of some of the work we've been doing.
Amazing. Thank you. It's great to give people a picture of like divestment on so many levels, targeting different institution and different ways our money are tied up in this genocide and an occupation. So you've touched a bit on like how banks are financing like some weapons companies that send weapons to Israel. Can you speak any more or on other levels, how are banks financing Israel's occupation? And the current genocide, but also like have been financing Israel's violence and occupation for a long time.
For sure. Well, I'm sure Tim can give more technical expertise around the whole piece around banking and these parts. But I mean, really, from our research and what we look at, of course, it's a direct investment like Elbit through the Investments 1832 company or Palantir that we've just spoke about. Or with any of the other companies that you named at the beginning. But also there is investments through indices such as the MSCI or the Morgan Stanley Capital International indices. And I think in many ways that's where a lot of the complicity is. A couple of years, I guess it was before COVID, a few of us met along with Al Haq, the human rights group in Ramallah. We met with the couple of the vice chairs of the Royal Bank of Canada, the presidents, and they were fairly, they were senior vice presidents, and they were willing to talk to us, but they really wanted to defer us, I'm sure, to say, well, unless you can solve the indices issue, so go to New York, go to Wall Street, and get that resolved. There's not much that we can do because those indices include numbers of companies that are, on the UN database, and we can talk about the UN database in a moment. But and so while they were deferring us, I do think they weren't wrong. That in fact, the systems are so integrated, and it's really hard to pull them apart, and it's easy for accountability to sort of be moved in different ways. So I mean, really, as we've talked to financial institutions, I mean, they really come down to well, we just follow Canadian law, and that is that there is no landmine investments and no cluster ammunition investments. Now, one might argue that if you look into Elbit or other companies, and I'm not an expert, that in fact through sort of second and third steps, some of that is also being invested in. So I guess I'm just trying to point a picture that it takes a fair amount of analysis, and it is really hard, even if you were to go to a bank and say, well, I just even want my own money to not be in these things, unless you're extraordinarily wealthy and can come up with something that's sort of very customized. It's very unlikely you're going to find something because those indices have all of that stuff inherently in them, and they keep going up and down as they trade on the markets to sort of get the best returns for those investments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that picture. You mentioned the UN list of companies supporting illegal Israeli settlements. Could you just tell us a little more about this list and how people might use it as a resource to know when their institution or their own finances are invested in a company on this list? What should they do?
For sure. So, I mean, that is a really a good place to start, and I think maybe quite a low bar to start with as well. So the United Nations back around 2017 or so said that they were going to come up with a list of companies based on certain criteria that basically are related to war crimes, although they didn't call it that, but basically investments supporting illegal settlements in occupied Palestine that would go on to a list. And there was a leak a couple of years before it took forever for that list. It was just a lot of anticipation for it to come out. And there was a leak, I think in 2018, that 2 Canadian companies would be on that list. But when it finally came out in 2020, there were 112 companies, but no Canadian companies on it. So it would almost seem that some kind of advocacy had happened somewhere to maybe cause those companies not to go on. And I'd be pretty sure that those were probably Bombardier and also WSP, which is an engineering firm and transnational one, but also one that's involved in, Metrolinx and redoing the Union Station for all of you in Toronto, but also for those of us in rural communities are probably doing a lot of our municipal and agricultural projects as well. And they also are the big project manager for the Jerusalem Light Rail. So even though some of the equipment providers like Alstom in Israel got put on the list, somehow those Canadian firms didn't. So I start by just mentioning that to give that context. In 2022, maybe it was even last year, 2023, the UN went through and removed about 15 companies who have sort of cleaned up their act because of being on the list and were taken off. So that was their first step to bring it back to 97 companies. I will find that link before we're done and put it in the chat. And you'll need to scroll down to get the PDF because it's sort of down the page and you can save the PDF. But those 97 companies would be a really good place to start if you're going to your credit union and say, are you invested in any of those? But please do add on maybe Bombardier, but definitely add on WSP. And WSP, we have Al-Haq in Palestine and Just Peace Advocates, the organization I'm part of, have actually made application a couple of years ago to have WSP added onto that list of very comprehensive proposal was put forward. So we just wait. There are a couple of other companies from other places in the world that have, had similar applications made. So we're hoping they're put on. I think you'll find for many of the credit unions, or other than the big sort of 5 banks especially, that you'll find that they aren't invested in those companies on the UN list because many of the companies, credit unions or case populaires may say we're just invested in Canadian companies, and they probably aren't invested in WSP because basically a large part of our Canada Pension Plan and Quebec Pension Plan are financing WSP or are the investors for WSP. So that's a lot of technicalities, but I think that list is a really good place to start, but it's barely the start. I would say a couple of other tools. Americans Friends Service Committee, so the Quaker group in the US, have a tool called Investigate, and you can basically download whether it's pensions or if you could get a list of investments in a bank or whatever, you can run it through their filter very quickly. You just need a Word document or a PDF or almost any sort of format, and it will spew out based on their companies, the companies that are in that portfolio. So that's a tool that we use when we're analyzing the pension plans. That includes occupation related to Palestine, but it includes other things like the Mexican-U.S. wall and prisons and other filters that can be put through. Other great lists to look at would be Who Profits, which is an Israeli think tank or a research group, I should say, who basically, again, just looking at occupation. I mean, these aren't looking at broader apartheid or they're basically based on international law and the Fourth Geneva Convention and the actual occupation, right? They don't even always, they include military as it relates to that, right? So that is another place that's really good to look at because that's really well researched, looking at companies that are complicit. So those kinds of lists would be important when you're actually either trying to get information from an institution that you're looking to switch to, or if you do switch because you see the ability to, in numbers, be able to make a difference through the membership and annual meetings, then to really push for those kinds of tools. Of course, to use the Canada Stop Arming Israel list that's on the World Beyond War list, which the Canadian BDS Coalition did some work on initially and then has moved over into the wonderful work with World Beyond War, would be another place to look. And then add a few other companies like the Zim shipping lines and others that may not come up through some of those lists. So I know that's not maybe much passion and it's a bit technical, but those tools are what we use to sort of analyze the pension plans. And I think we could do so much more work related to banking with the right expertise and capacity. So I'll drop some of those links as well into the chat as probably as Tim's speaking.
Amazing. Thank you, Karen. We've had so many questions around like what tools can I use to assess like which of my investments are tied up in occupation, which you rightly noted is like only one piece of this larger picture. The BDS has a much broader target. Can you tell us a little more before we let you go about the BDS movement? Why is it so important? Maybe share some wins it's had. We had some questions around like, does divestment work? Does boycotting work? Yeah, can you just give us a little introduction to the BDS movement?
Sure. So BDS, basically boycott, which is more your consumer goods, but could in fact be things that are also normalizing, like academic and cultural sports types of boycotts as well, to sort of say, you know, promoting brand Israel is not acceptable. The divestment is, of course, what we're mainly here talking about in terms of moving money to other places, and sanctions. You think of usually as government, but could be other institutions, certainly South Africa, and boycott of the Olympics being an example. And maybe that'll be the one for Palestine, or maybe we thought it could have been the FIFA World Cup, but you know, that kind of thing too. So there are those three tactics. In terms of the support for BDS, it really is core to ending the occupation. So the occupation, basically what I would call as ending apartheid from the river to the sea. So that would include equality, including in the state that they call Israel in 48 for all people. And of course, right of return for those who were made refugees in 1948 and in 1967, and I guess in 2024 as we watch Gaza, right? So basically the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 194. So some groups may practice a little bit of the tactics like a boycott, but they may not fully support right of return as an example, or may in the past not been even willing to say the word apartheid out loud. It came for Palestine really as a Palestinian call in 2005, following a year after the International Court of Justice made the ruling around the illegal nature of the separation wall that had been built at that time. But boycott goes back, well, you know, as an age-old tactic. But if we were and had time, we could pull up the Hansards from the Ontario legislature or from the Canadian legislature back in the 1970s and see the discussions related to boycott around Israel going back at that point. So there's, you know, quite a history, even within our own Canadian context of you know, what could be boycotted. And certainly the first intifada in the Palestinian context was very much an internal boycott. So while it's sort of been described as a movement over the last almost 20 years, you know, it's just sort of age-old tactics. For the Canadian BDS Coalition, we'd welcome any groups that would support our basis of unity, which would include sort of the principles I've suggested, but also being anti-Zionist. We feel that's very important. And also, of course, the importance of, complicity, especially as we've come through these last 6 months in terms of our own state or the US or other states, and standing to realize that there may be other areas where feasible that we may also want to be boycotting from a more imperial stance. So again, I can drop in a bit more information about the BDS Coalition, or maybe that's almost some of this I know is being dropped in even as I speak. So thank you for keeping that chat going. But yeah, it's certainly a tactic that is organic and is moving onto the streets in many ways, whether it be, with indigo or be with many other things. Certainly this month right now during the holy month of Ramadan, certainly to be clear about Majul dates would be one area that I just think is really important to be speaking out, and things that people aren't gonna maybe make the big changes that divestments and moving bigger dollars around will, but are important parts of education and are an important part of standing with that solidarity and education, and also just with good conscience, right? With just good conscience.
Thank you, Karen. We know these are massive topics, and you did such a good job of fitting a lot in there for us. Thank you. And you're right, we'll look forward to those resources from you, but we are dropping some in the chat. And some of those databases you mentioned, we found really useful in our own research. And we do have those linked on our webpage as well, including that UN database, which can be a little tricky to find. So that link is there, and we'll drop it in the chat too. Thank you so much. That was really informative, Karen. Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Tim. Tim, we had so many questions, as you know. It's funny, like a lot of people said when they registered, like, yeah, I'm like ready to break up with my bank, but I'm scared to. And it's just like a relationship, it's toxic, you want to leave, but you're used to it. And what's the new one going to be like? So there are a lot of questions about like how to navigate this. But thank you for joining us today. Tim, do you want to start by like introducing yourself
Sure.
and maybe talk about the work you do?
Happy to do so. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much, Karen, Eve. Like, to follow these speakers is just an honor. My background is that I grew up in London, Ontario with my dad in the investment industry. So I grew up around stocks and bonds. I always had a really good head for finance. I studied economics and philosophy for my undergrad. And the philosopher in me had all these questions and issues with the economy, saying, wait a minute, it's really not working for people nor for the planet. And I had all these questions, and my economics professors didn't have answers. So I went to Sweden and I did my master's in sustainability. And it was awesome. I learned about systems thinking and all this really cool stuff, and planetary limits to growth, and all these wonderful things. I did my thesis looking at sustainable investing. Back in the day, we called it socially responsible investing, SRI. The language has kind of evolved a little bit over time, but I did my thesis on that. Came back to Canada in July of 2008, ready to take the investment world by storm. Does anyone know what happened in October of 2008? Right? Great timing, Tim. Good job. So there were no jobs in finance. Sustainability got thrown on the back burner. So I started my own company. I've been through a bunch of different iterations, but really I started writing and blogging about this idea of sustainable investing and how to actually do it with your own money under my blog, sustainableeconomist.com. And people started reaching out saying, Tim, how do I actually do this? Like all the questions you've been getting, right? I was getting all those about 10 years ago. And so that's when I decided to rebrand. I call my company is now Good Investing. And I got my CFP designation. I'm a certified financial planner. I also have a designation called RIS, Responsible Investment Specialist. So, I've done my studying on this stuff, and I'm on a mission to help 1 million people invest intentionally. And I don't really care what those intentions are. Everyone has their own definition. Obviously, for us here in this room, I think it's really about demilitarization and, probably about climate change as well, just understanding that intersectionality. So this is what I do day to day is I help people figure this stuff out and fire their banks and break up with their investment advisors. So I've got a wealth of knowledge. I know we had so many questions. I'm gonna do my best to kind of almost like try to do like lightning round. If I go off on a tangent, Franklin, please just like, because I know we have a lot of questions at the same time. If people want to get nerdy, like I'm happy to go there, and I'll dive as deep into the weeds as people want to go. So it's always about finding a little bit of attention there. I'm going to do my best to I've got the chat on another screen. I'm going to try to ignore it. I've been really active in there while other people have been chatting, but I'm going to try to ignore that. And Franklin, if I can just let you sort of direct me. But I'm a bit of a wind up toy. Point me in the right direction and let's go.
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for being active in the chat and already starting to answer so many questions. Yeah, one of the biggest questions we're getting is just like, what is a credit union? How does it work differently than a bank?
Yes.
And then there were a lot of questions around like, well, why might this be better? Why might it be more ethical? And then also, is this risky? Like, is my money as safe? How do credit unions fare long term if there's a financial crisis? A lot of fears around
Yes.
it. So I
Great
think
place to start.
this.
I'll just give a quick little overview that when it comes to financial planning, there are a lot of different sort of branches to this. So what we're going to talk about now is the idea of checking and even kind of like savings, like if you've got an emergency fund, but kind of like where to park your cash and do your day-to-day checking and banking. There are the other branches like debt, so credit cards, mortgages, lines of credit, all that fun stuff. There's insurance, home insurance, car insurance, life insurance, all that stuff. And then there's investments. And in the investment branch is where I spend like most of my time. That's where I'm like a super nerd. But I just want to make sure people understand that there are all these different branches. For now, we're going to start by focusing on checking accounts. Let me just start there. And, because I think this is a really good place. We all probably have a checking account. If you're like me, your parents opened you an account when you were a kid and you just stayed with that same bank ever since then, just for default, out of default options. And now a lot of us are shopping around. So, okay, what you need to understand is that banks are publicly traded companies. So they trade on the stock market, which means that they have shareholders, which means that legally banks are legally required to maximize profits for shareholders. That is why they exist. Okay. Fundamentally, credit unions are structured differently. Credit unions are co-ops, cooperatives, meaning that they're not owned by shareholders, they're owned by members. That when I join a credit union, the first thing I had to do was buy membership shares, right? Which means that instead of trying to maximize profits for shareholders, credit unions are designed to maximize benefits to members, to customers. Now, that's huge. It's also important to understand the voting structure, the ownership structure, because there was talk earlier about, RBC and this AGM, this annual general meeting. And the way it works with banks is that it's one share, one vote. So the more shares I own, the more votes I have with the banks. Whereas with credit unions, it's one member, one vote. It doesn't matter how many shares you own, every member gets the same vote. So, really fundamentally, you got to understand that the governance structure is such that credit unions are always going to be more locally minded and less profit driven than banks. There's still some profit motive in there and they still want to do well. But that's the default setting. Now, if I can go like a layer deeper, because I think this is, the sustainability side and what people are really getting at. It's about understanding that for whenever I have a dollar deposited at a bank, right? We know they don't keep that dollar in the vault, right? That they're going to take it out and loan it out to other organizations. But what people don't realize is that's not quite how it works. That they leave my dollar in the vault, but they use my dollar to create a multiple. It's usually about 19 times whatever my deposit is, and they're allowed to create that debt out of thin air and loan it out to their clients. So for every dollar I keep in the bank, they can loan out $19 to clients. Now, who do banks loan money to? We know that in addition to loaning money to like small businesses and mortgages, also loan money to large corporations. They're big funders of fossil fuels. And they're absolutely, if I'm, one of the companies that Karen was talking about on that list, and I wanted money to fund a big project, then I'm going to go to a big bank first to get that funding. Now, credit unions operate the same way. They still get to create that money out of thin air. That every dollar I keep in my credit union creates $19 worth of loans. But who are credit unions loaning money to? They are overwhelmingly likely to be loaning money within my community to mortgages and small business loans. So again, even if a credit union doesn't have, default like explicit, like, okay, I'm not going to loan money to military companies or fossil fuels, that by default setting, it's going to be like 99 times more ethical and less likely to be loaning that money to companies that I feel less comfortable about. So, really when it comes to credit unions, it is, it's just so much more local, more ethical. From a safety perspective, so deposits at banks are covered by something called the CDIC, Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation. So up to 100K is covered per account. Even if the bank goes bankrupt, your deposits are insured by that CDIC insurance, right? Credit unions are governed provincially. So they're covered by something called, oh my goodness, what's the acronym? It's the Deposit Insurance Corporation of Ontario. Don't ask me what it is in other provinces, but here in Ontario, I think it's DICO, Deposit Insurance. And there, your insurance is actually up to 250K per account. And but it is insured by the provincial government rather than the federal government. So very, very similar protections. Even if the credit union goes bankrupt, your deposits are still insured. It's the same safety, it's the same security. And then what we're doing is just by holding our savings at a credit union, it's way more likely that we're contributing to our local economy and lending, frankly, to our neighbors, compared to when we keep that money in the bank. Their goal is to maximize profits for shareholders, and they're going to loan money to whoever the heck is going to pay them, and let them maximize those profits. Is that okay?
That was the clearest description I've heard of the difference and why at the core credit unions are more.
Unions are awesome. Amazing.
Seeing so many reactions in the chat, like, wow, mind blown. I had no idea. Thank you. That's such a great start. You answered a lot of questions there. I know we also got a lot of questions around, do credit unions offer the same services that I want out of a bank? For example, can I e-transfer? Can I get a TFSA, a business account, a credit card? Can you speak a bit to that?
Yeah. So, okay. So really where credit unions shine is checking accounts, checking savings accounts. I can do everything through my credit union. I'll just share my story real quick, which is that I grew up, I don't even remember what bank my parents got me. It was like, I remember I got a little passbook when I was a kid, but at some point along the line, they got bought out by Scotiabank. So I was by default doing my banking at Scotiabank. I had a terrible experience with them. Part of it was I was starting to learn about this stuff. I mean, like, hey, they just, I remember, when I first started my business, trying to cash a check, but it was from a client in like Europe. So it was in euros, and I had already spent it in my head. Okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to take this money. And I went to check and they're like, ooh, it's a foreign check. There's going to be a 21 business day holding period on this. And I was like broke. Like I had like not even $20 in my checking account. Like I couldn't even take out a $20 bill from an ATM. And I was devastated. I was like, you have to be able to work with me. I was like basically in tears in the branch. And the teller was just like cold face, like, no, I don't like, no, this is policy, like no wiggle room whatsoever. So that's when I was like, okay, that was my impetus where I was like, screw this. I started shopping around. I'm now a member at 2 different credit unions. Duca, DUCA is where my wife and I have our joint checking account where we do our day-to-day banking. And then Alterna is where I have my business account that I am incorporated. So I've got a separate business account and I've got my one there. I am originally from London, Ontario. So for a while I was a member at Libro because that's like local to London and Southwestern Ontario. But, I moved away. So I ended up closing that account. But that basically I can do all my day-to-day banking. They have an app where I can deposit checks with my phone. I really only ever had to go into a branch one time. It was like I wanted to cash a US dollar check. And I was like, you're not going to convert this to Canadian dollars for me. I want US dollars. So I had to go into a branch for that. But otherwise, everything's been online. Online banking, everything's great. I pay all my bills online. It's like same. Some of the banks, like especially the digital ones, have slightly better user interfaces, like where it's like kind of sleek. Most of the banks, like, if you're still with RBC, how terrible their interface is. So it's going to be kind of middle of the road. I don't expect them to have like superior tech. Some of them, credit unions like Libro, had really good tech. But it's not going to be worse than the banks. It's basically going to be on par in terms of everything. The other thing I'll mention that's comes up a lot is ATMs and ATM fees. And so I just want to be clear that credit unions are part of something called the Exchange Network. And so I get to use any credit union ATM for free. So even though I'm not with Meridian, there's a Meridian branch like around the corner, and I can use the Meridian ATM for free. I can also use any national bank, any HSBC, although they just got bought by RBC, so probably not soon. But yeah, they're like, so, and there's like a website and a little app I can use to figure out where all the free ATMs are. But to be clear, I do like 99% of my banking online. And then I use that exchange ATM network whenever I need to pull out cash.
Amazing. Thank you. That just answered so many questions people had. Another big question, and I know this could be very complicated depending on people's finances, but people are asking, like, what are some of the practical steps in terms of switching from a bank to a credit union? And I know you wrote about this, which is why we reached out to you.
Yeah. So, okay, I did a blog post for a while. It was really funny. I did it. It was like I wrote it on my birthday because I've been meaning to do it for so long. It was like my birthday present to the world kind of thing. So I called it How to Fire Your Bank. And I came up with my steps to do it. I don't know if someone can throw a link in the chat or I can do it a little bit later, but it's on my Good Investing. You can also go old school and probably find it on my sustainableeconomist.com website where I originally published it. But yeah, and then I got so much blowback from that, from people like defending the banks and being like, banks aren't that bad. That I then wrote a blog post following up being like, 3 reasons credit unions are awesome, because I was like, no, let me tell you why. So our blogs, but when it comes to the practical side of switching, and again, this is just checking, and this is where I would suggest starting. Okay, great place. Don't the insurance, the debt, and the credit cards, and the investments. We can talk about that in a minute. For now, it's checking. Really, what you want to do is you want to start by choosing your credit union. This is like the hardest part. This is where people get analysis paralysis, like which credit union should I go with, this versus that. Honestly, just pick one. Just pick one. Like, they're all really good. Yes, some are a little better than others. I've chosen the ones that I did. Duca, I love. They are a B Corp. That to me is really important. That's like a stamp. That's like a benefit corporation. So I really love them for that. Alterna has done some really cool social programs. So I'm really involved with the Center for Social Innovation. And they offered me, like, it was called a Catapult microloan when I was first starting my business. And so I got like a loan, a low interest loan from Alterna to rebrand as Good Investing. And that meant a lot to me. So that's why I really like Alterna. But Meridian, there are local ones. I've got some friends that are with like the local, like Ukrainian credit union, or there's like all these different, ones that you can do. Just pick one. Okay. Pick one. And again, most of your stuff is online. So they don't even need to have a branch near you, although that doesn't hurt. From there, once you've picked a credit union, start by joining the credit union. Set up your like landing spot, right? And so join the credit union, open up a basic checking account. What you're going to want to do there is start informing anyone that you get direct deposit from. So tell your boss, like, change your direct deposit. Tell you the MyCRA. So when you get your tax return or your little, like, your carbon tax rebate, you want it going into that account. Any of your e-transfer, like if you have it set up to your email for e-transfer, get that going now into your new credit union. That really start with all of your revenues. Anyone that's giving you money you need to deposit, start with that. The next step is to then add all of your bill payees, right? So, and again, it doesn't matter who your credit card is with, or where your mortgage is with, or any form of debt. They just want your money. You don't have to pay it from the same account. So you can pay your RBC credit card from your credit union account, right? These are separate things. So you want to add all of your bill payees, right, is the next step, so that you can pay all of your bills. It's a little tedious setting that up, but you only have to do it once. And then from there, you just want to get into the rhythm, right, of just using that checking account with the credit union. I would say give it like at least a month. I would say 3 months to 6 months tops before you fire your bank, just to make sure you didn't miss anything. The last thing you want is for like a direct deposit or, someone's trying to pay you and it's like now going to an account so give it a little bit of time first. Get comfortable in your new shoes, in your new credit union, situation first. And then after a few months, once there's like no activity in your bank anymore, and you're just like, okay, I'm not getting any direct deposits, I'm not paying any bill, like there's nothing happening in my bank account, that's when you can get creative and decide to how you want to fire your bank, walk in, make a big stink, or, like do a video of you like chopping up your card or however the heck you want to do it. But really what you want to do is you want to secure your landing place first. The way you do that is by joining a credit union, all of your direct deposits, all of your bill payees, and then that's when you're ready to fire your bank.
Amazing. That was so helpful. Thank you. We did get a lot of questions. You've mentioned about debts, loans, mortgages.
Yes.
Can people transfer those from a bank to a credit union? What might that be?
Perfect. Okay. So first of all, I want to be clear, debts to me are a lower priority. Okay. Now, certainly it sucks if you're paying interest to RBC or whoever, because they're getting profits from you, right? So it's not ideal, but it's not that multiplier impact of having your deposits there. Okay. So I want to be clear, like, I don't want people like paying penalties or making like kind of silly financial moves to get their debt out of these banks. Because when you're borrowing money from the banks, right? Well, it's about how you're going to spend on it. And especially if you're able to keep your balance at zero, like for a credit card, you're actually not really paying them anything. Yes, you are a customer with them. Yes, if we can switch, great. But I want to be clear, this is a lower priority. When it comes to credit cards, the one thing I want you to be careful, and number one is again, get your new credit card. The issue with the credit cards in Canada is that, and this is the thing with credit unions, like I said, they really shine with checking accounts. They don't have their own credit cards. They partner with like Calabria. Like when I joined Duca, I was like, oh, I'll get a Duca credit card. It's through Calabria. Calabria, I think, is owned by TD, right? Like these are, it's the credit unions themselves. They partner with credit card companies. It's not actually them themselves. So I actually want you to shop around for the best credit card for you. And I'm happy to share like the credit cards that we have, and that sometimes it is with a bank. Because for me, it's like that's more of a financial thing, especially if I'm just going to keep the balance at zero. I'm not going to pay them any interest. I'm just going to collect points from them. Sure, no problem. Okay. But when it comes to credit cards, the thing that I want you to be absolutely clear on is that I never want you to cancel your oldest credit card. Because when it comes to your credit score, this is an important thing for us to keep a good credit score. And those credit rating agencies, those credit scores love having an old card that you've had for decades, that you've paid off the balance every single month, right? They love having that on your file. So if you have one of those old school credit cards from like your undergrad days or whatever, keep it alive. Don't cancel it. You don't have to like put money on it. You can literally do like one transaction once in a blue moon on it, kind of thing, but keep it active. Don't actually cancel that credit card, because that one is helpful for your credit score. But then again, my suggestion for debt is like just shop around, like get the best deal on debt. And when it comes to mortgage providers, if you don't want to go through a bank, great. There are a lot of more independent debt providers, right? That might be better. You can get it through a credit union, but I don't want you to like pay a higher interest rate on your mortgage to like do it through a credit union. You know what I mean? Like to me, that's like, no, like please think about this with both the financial hat and the sustainability hat. And when it comes to debt, I want you to use the financial hat a little bit more, because the impact is really just that like you're like a customer on their list, or you might be providing them with a little bit of interest. It's not going to be the same impact as holding your deposits or your investments there. Does that make sense? Is that helpful with debt? I think I covered everything there, but it's basically like, shop around for credit cards, figure out the best system that's right for you. When it comes to line of credits and things like that, you should be able to get it through the credit union. But again, they're not great. Like, don't expect that credit unions are going to like give you a good deal because you're an ethically minded person. They outsource all their debt. So they outsource to the same risk management firms that the banks use. So, it can be really tricky. Like I'm part of a couple nonprofits who, joined Alterna. We want to do our banking through Alterna, but then we go to get an Alterna credit card. And they're like, well, you're a new nonprofit. So if you want a $5,000 credit card, you need to keep $5,000 in the bank. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, no, that's why I need a credit card. Like, so their risk systems, just know that, aren't always ideal. And that to me, it's like, feel free to shop around for your debt provider. It doesn't need to be through the same credit union.
That's really helpful. I know a lot of people have felt really stuck on the debt part, and I'm really
Yes.
hearing like a very powerful move is even to just move those like everyday banking accounts.
Yes. And
You
even if you have, especially your mortgage, like your mortgages are really tricky to break, right?
right,
So if you have your mortgage there, and I've heard a lot of people be like, well, I have my mortgage at TD, so I can't leave TD. It's like you totally can leave TD and keep your mortgage there. It's the mortgage division. You can pay that from any bank account. They just want you to pay your mortgage. They don't care what account it comes from.
I see. Oh, I see. Seeing how the debt's connected across institutions.
And this is where it's weird, and like forgive the term, but the way banks are set up is they have these different divisions, right? So again, personal banking, like checking and savings, debt, insurance, investments are all very separate branches. The term we use for this, it's like a terrible term, but they call it Chinese firewalls between them, that they're actually not even allowed to talk to each other. So the corporate finance team can't talk to the wealth management team. Like the banks have to have these separate divisions. And so again, as you're interacting with these groups, don't feel like you need one credit union for everything. Feel free to have, pick something, the best option for your checking account, which is going to be a credit union. But for debt, it might not be a credit union that's your best option. For insurance, it'd be great if it was a credit union or a co-op. A group like the Cooperators is really cool, where they're not a credit union, but they are a co-op, right? But get the best insurance for you. And then for your investments, I think we'll get to that in a few minutes. But again, that's like a separate thing. You may or may not want to actually do that through your credit union, because I'm telling you, your credit union has outsourced that to a third party, has
Mhm.
like hired, right? That they have a relationship, but it's not actually them that are administering your investments.
Right. Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm seeing the chat really blow up. I can't follow all of it, but I've also seen a lot of people pushing for this question around how do we deal with RRSPs, TFSAs, and mutual funds that are tied up in a bank.
Yes. Okay. So now let me shift gears to investments. And like I said, this is where I'm a super nerd. So I'm going to do my best to keep it high level, but I'm so down for getting into the weeds on this if people want to. I will preface this also by saying that this is like a massive topic. Okay. So, no, I need everyone to know that I'm happy. I offer everyone a free consultation. So, if you want to talk about your specific situation and your, like, this is a very individual thing, my website is goodinvesting.com. There's a little button where you can book a free consultation with me. I'm happy to sit down and chat with you for half an hour as well. I knew that we were going to get this question and that I could only do a little bit. So I'm scheduling my own webinar for April 9th, which is like how to switch advisors, where I'm going to go into like nerdy stuff about either if you want to switch to DIY or if you want to go to a full service advisor, and kind of the process and the mechanics of how to do that, obviously with a focus in doing it in a sustainable manner. So that's kind of my caveat, is that there is more information for those who need it. I'll try to keep it high level. Okay. So the way investments work, this is like my system map. I'm going to try to map it out, is it starts with the institution. Okay. So this could be your bank right now, RBC, TD, Scotia, whatever. This could be your credit union right now. It could be an online broker like Questrade or Wealthsimple, or I saw someone like talking about Interactive Brokers in there, right? These are all different institutions. Okay. High level. At the institution, you have multiple accounts. So I like to think of these as vaults. So you have your RSP, you have your TFSA, you might have an FHSA, first time home buyer savings account. And then if all of those are full, you might actually have like an unregistered or a taxable account. I forgot to mention one thing I totally want to mention is an RDSP, Registered Disability Savings Plan. I'm on a mission. Only 15%, 15% of Canadians who are eligible for an RDSP actually have one. So if you or someone you know is living with a disability and qualify for the disability tax credit, the DTC is an acronym. If you qualify for the DTC, you qualify for an RDSP. And the RDSP is a great savings vehicle for people living with disabilities because they're government top ups. It's like very generous top ups. The idea is that people living with disabilities are going to have more expenses in retirement. This is a way the government helps them, but very few people who are eligible for this know about it. So again, RDSP, if you're living with a disability or know someone who does, please star asterisk, learn more about RDSP and I can help you with that. So, okay, so institution, and then we have all these vaults, these different accounts that are like mostly tax shelters. And then inside of those vaults, we can hold a whole bunch of different things. People can hold individual stocks, you can hold bonds, you can hold cash. Most Canadians hold something called mutual funds, which are these pooled funds with very diversified with what's inside, right? That's 80% of Canadians own mutual funds. But I don't love mutual funds, Franklin, because they're very expensive. I have a whole blog post on why mutual funds are a ripoff, because I think they're a ripoff, but also they're not very transparent. Has anyone ever tried to find the full list of holdings inside of a mutual fund? I know there are a few of you in the chat who've probably tried to do this, and I can tell you it's so hard. Nahid, I see you smiling. I know you've tried to do it before, and it is so hard. I do it. I know how to do it, but I'm like Indiana Jones going through like 500-page PDFs trying to get the full list of, and then it's like 8 months old. It's like what it was 8 months ago. So they're just mutual funds, very expensive, not very transparent. I love these things called ETFs, exchange traded funds, which are very similar to mutual funds, but instead of being sold through an advisor, through a salesperson, these are things that we can purchase online ourselves, right? Takes a little more knowledge, right? But believe me, the rewards are worth it because ETFs are very similar to mutual funds, but way cheaper and way more transparent. So these are like the layers of the onion. So institution, and then accounts, and then what's inside their account. So my role as a certified financial planner, as I'm working through an investment plan with someone, right, is that we always start with the most basic of financial planning, right, which is like budgeting cash flow. But if you've got enough money, right, we start with an emergency fund, and then you get your emergency fund filled up, and now we can invest for the long term. That's when we need to talk about which accounts are right for you. And this is a big fat it depends question. Depends on your time horizon and your income and your eligibility for these different things. These are very individual questions, which vaults you should be putting money into. And then once we know which vaults you should be putting money into, it's a question of which funds do we buy inside of those vaults. And this is where the work that I do is that I help people build investment portfolios. And the portfolio is what goes inside of those vaults. I like to say that it's a pie chart. And I have this analogy where we're baking a pie, okay? And the way I do it is that the crust of the pie are your bonds. Bonds are like the turtle in the race, a little safer, a little more stable. The filling are the stocks, right? That's really why we eat pies. We want the filling, right? So that's really why, right? But then everyone's going to have a different mix of stocks to bonds. Now, most of your portfolio, most of your pie chart is going to be this mix of stocks and bonds and are going to do what I call doing less evil, where for me, diversification is a core value. I don't want people picking individual stocks. Don't do individual stocks. We don't want to spend all of our time, like we're not day traders. We want to buy and hold for decades. So we want to buy these diversified funds. And so most of your money should be invested in what I call doing less evil stocks and bonds, where the goal is to own as much of the global stock market as you ethically feel comfortable owning. And everyone's going to have a different line in the sand about what they feel comfortable. But this is where it's very easy to demilitarize a portfolio. Very easy. It's a little bit tricky to divest from fossil fuels. Karen, I learned something from you earlier about WSP Global, and that's a company that I'm going to be looking out for because that's one that I think is going to, but this is where my expertise comes in, is about navigating these methodologies where they have these different screening approaches, doing less evil approaches, and helping people find an approach that is still diversified, that's still going to earn the same returns as you would in the traditional market, but do it in a way that aligns with your values. And it's totally possible. We can totally do it. There are a wide range of funds available. I can talk ETFs, I can talk mutual funds. Some of them are greenwashing. Some of them are where it's like they take a tiny step in the right direction and they label it as ESG or sustainable or SRI, socially responsible investing, right? And those are the ones that I can kind of call out as BS. And then there are some legit ones that go pretty far. And I want to be clear, I've done like a vegan portfolio. I've helped, like, I talk about the anarchist's wife, and how and I've helped like an anarchist's wife figured out a portfolio. And again, a lot of that is going to be doing less evil. So that's kind of the bulk of your pie is stocks and bonds. Wear my financial planner hat. That's all you need is a pie chart with stocks and bonds doing less evil. Great. But then because people want to do more good, right? Then what we can do is add a little bit of ice cream on the pie, a little bit of whipped cream or fruit, whatever you like. But this is what I call, thematic investing, where we can carve out part of your portfolio for things like renewable energy, clean technology, water infrastructure, whatever you're doing more good is, whatever. If you want to put a little bet on, something that you feel good about and that you think is going to grow, we can totally do that. But I only want you to do it with part of your money. I can't tell you how many clients I've talked out of like they want to put all of their money into hydrogen or they want to put all of their money into like electric cars. And I'm like, it's a terrible idea. They're just it's so risky. It's not diversified. We can do it, but you want to do it with part. It's like the ice cream on the pie. It's not the pie itself. And then the cherry on top that I know this crowd is going to love. And I promised someone for some good news on this. So the cherry on top are impact investments. And this is the real like crunchy granola, grassroots, restorative investments. These are going to be things like community bonds, which if people, I don't know if people know about the community bond model, but I can give a quick little primer on it. But these are loans to nonprofits and co-ops to build projects that have a positive impact. I own 3 community bonds, Solar Share, which is community-owned solar projects in Ontario, CSI, Center for Social Innovation, a nonprofit co-working space here in Toronto that owns 2 buildings. How the heck does a nonprofit buy 2 buildings in downtown Toronto? Community bonds. And a third is called Sketch, an amazing nonprofit. They offer arts programming to youth experiencing homelessness. They have an incredible studio space on Shaw Street, the Artscape building. You're nodding, Franklin, right? So you know it. So Sketch now owns that building. That all the mess that Artscape has been through over the last year and the uncertainty, I don't need to get into that, but like you can imagine how the tenants there, Sketch doesn't have to worry about that because they own their building. How does a nonprofit buy building on like Queen West? Community bonds. We're now starting to see a lot more community bonds for affordable housing projects. Obviously, there's a huge need for more affordable housing and co-ops. I have lots of really cool examples. I could talk for like hours about community bonds and impact investments, right? But again, that's like the cherry on top. That's like a tiny little slice of someone's portfolio. For the anarchist wife, she was like, I tell him I want more of the doing more good. So we were able to carve out, a bigger slice for these types of impact investments. But that is the section where we do trade off financial returns. Whereas for the rest of the portfolio with the doing less evil, you really don't need to sacrifice returns. We can earn just as good financial returns as you normally would, but do it in a way that's aligned with your values. And then for the impact investing piece, that's where we are impact first, where the goal really is that positive impact, those warm fuzzies. And then, hey, we're also earning, 3%, 4% interest, sort of great, but that's not really why we're doing it. So that's kind of the portfolio. That's my theory. That's my overarching theory. It's like institution, account, portfolio. I have this whole framework around portfolio construction, doing less evil, doing more good. In terms of where to start with this, because I think that's probably where we're getting with this, is again, you need to figure out your landing place first. Before you're ready to break up with your bank or fire your advisor, you got to figure out what you're going to do otherwise. So this is where I'm a huge help. I'll give everyone a free consultation. I offer online courses. So I just finished up a foundations course. This is a really good place. Like the starting point is always to like learn about this stuff. Learning about investing is much more, it's not math. It's much more about learning a new language that they just never taught us in school, right? All these different terms and acronyms, and it's learning a new language. But if you can get your head wrapped around it, then really the choice becomes, do I want to learn how to do it myself, which is always going to be the cheapest and the most customizable option? or do I want to hire someone else to do it for me? Either option is fine. Either option is fine. But that really is the sort of fork in the road. And if you want to learn to do it yourself, I have a method, I have a process. We can talk about it. There's like a path for you there. You're like, Tim, I do not want to manage it myself. Like, that scares the crap out of me. I want to pay someone to do it for me. Then that's when we can shop around, right, for a financial, advisor or a robo advisor that does, sort of the best job. I want to be clear when it comes to this. There's no such thing as a perfectly sustainable portfolio. There are always sort of these trade-offs that we need to evaluate, but this is the work that I do, is I help people kind of figure this out. But it really comes down to, do you want to do it yourself, or do you want to pay someone to do it for you? And then once you've made that decision, then the path becomes pretty straightforward. If it's DIY, you've got to like build your pie, choose a broker, set up your accounts, a little bit of more administrative stuff. If you want to pay someone to do it for you, that's when we do a little sort of manager search, where there are a whole bunch of different managers across the country, different people who do this, who are like legit about it and don't think you're weird for wanting to, divest. But really, I want to be clear that there's a big power dynamic when it comes to advisors, that a lot of people are probably with an advisor and feel really awkward talking to their advisor about this. If that's you, if that's resonant, then it's like, okay, it's probably time to shop around. I can teach you how to advocate and how to work with your existing advisor. But, if they're not open to it, frankly, let's find somebody who is. That was a lot. That was a big one.
Oh, thank you. I'm learning a lot, and the chat's really blowing up for people are like, just yeah, it is a new language.
It is a new language.
Yeah, thank you. You're breaking it down for us.
I'm happy to be your translator.
Yeah. I know there's been requests to like let us know how we can learn about your upcoming webinar that you mentioned.
Yes.
So
Okay.
if you can
Let
share
me get
that.
some links. Yeah, give me a moment. I have a little thing. I have it easily accept. I got it all set up before I sent out
It's
this.
like
So here
there.
we go. Here is, I'll throw it in the chat. Did that? Yes, that is the full link. Okay, there it is. So it's like through Zoom. It's like how to break up with or how to switch advisors,
Mm.
right? And then, I do have my online courses here. It's a little tricky. I don't think I can link to it. One of them is on demand for people who want to DIY for sure. If you want to DIY, I have DIY Sustainable Portfolio. And then I do have the foundations course. That's more of a cohort. So I did a cohort in February. I'll do another one this summer. And really would encourage people, like, sign up for my newsletter, that I'm building a really cool new like little digital platform that I just love. Where's my, let me just get, here we go. If you just go to the homepage and scroll down, you can sign up to my newsletter, because I am in the process, like, I want to do more courses. I see myself more and more as a teacher. So I'd love to do a micro course on how to fire your bank and join a credit union. I want to be able to offer the foundations course both on demand and as a cohort. So I'm working on some back end systems, but sign up for my newsletter so that when my new like digital classroom is ready, you'll be able to see it and get in there.
That's great. I think you'd have a lot of people wanting to take that
Yay.
breakup course.
Yay.
Breakups are easier when you're doing it together.
Well, and this is part of it, is that, when it comes to breaking up, especially with your advisor, like I said, find a new partner first, like figure out your new dance partner. And then, to be honest, like, part of the process is like, we can send a little courtesy email to your advisor, but you don't even have to, like, you can, because whoever you're going with, they want your money. So like, they will actually break up for you. It's like one of these services where you can, like, send someone to break up with the bank for you. You don't even have to do it yourself if you don't want to. But the trick is figuring out where you're going to land, that you can't, break up with your bank if you don't know where you're going to land for these very, very important financial services.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful with what you call the analysis paralysis. We've been seeing that a lot and experienced it ourselves, where you want to choose like the perfect credit union and then you never actually switch.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Right. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
The other thing I want to say, Franklin, is that when it comes to money, like, for me, the overwhelming emotions attached to money are guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Right? it is. And I felt it, and I think so many of us feel it. And often that adds with analysis paralysis to inaction. So one of
Mhm.
my favorite sayings is just, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. That don't get bogged down by wishing you had done this sooner, or if only I had done it before, or 20 years ago if I had bought Bitcoin, something like that. That really it's just like, no, accept where you are today and let's take control. Let's like take a deep breath, take stock of the assets. That if we have assets, this is a privilege. We have wealth, right? Let's use that wealth. Let's make intentional decisions now going forward that align with our values. That's all any of us can do. So don't get caught in the analysis paralysis. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. If you see a good option, go for it. Doesn't have to be the perfect option. If it's a good option, we can always switch later. There's always flexibility. And then number two is just don't focus on the past. Don't let that, whatever guilt, whatever shame, whatever family, trauma around money, and we hang on to our parents' beliefs about money so much. Take a deep breath. Let's set your intentions. How do you want to handle your money? And let's set that up moving forward.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. I'm maybe going to end with one more question along these like empowering lines
Yes.
too. Because we've mentioned a bit throughout this webinar that as members, people like can advocate at their new credit union for what they want to see grow or change at that credit union. And you mentioned a bit the process of becoming a member. Could you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more? I know there's a fee involved. Sometimes people are worried about that. And then also the like what can people do once they are a member at a
Sure.
credit union to advocate for what they want to see happen at that credit union?
Love it. Great question. First of all, there shouldn't be fees for switching, especially your checking and savings. Nuh-uh. In fact, like with Duca, I have a zero fee checking account.
Mhm.
Like it's cheaper for me doing my banking at Duca than it was at Scotia. Okay. For investments, there might be what's called a transfer out fee. Remember, the new institution, they want your money. Most of the time, they'll cover that transfer out fee for you if you ask. So when we switch, there are no fees to switch. It's not a financial reason to stay put, right? A lot of people feel trapped. They're like, oh, well, Tim, if I keep $10,000 in my account, then I get this thing for free that costs me otherwise, $5 and I don't even need. No, like just switch. Um, from there, once you are a member of a credit union, and this is frustrating. Okay, I'll be real with people. I'll share my experiences that it still is frustrating dealing with credit unions from within. They are not the bastions of hope and sustainability we want them to be. Okay. My dream, and I don't know how the heck I'm going to organize this, is essentially to orchestrate a coup of their board of directors. The issue is that I've tried running as a board of director a few times and I've never even made it on the ballot.
Mm.
Like Duca, I love Duca. I love Duca. I ran for the board of directors. I thought I was like, got good qualifications. I thought it'd be really good. No, they told me. And then it turns out there were only four candidates on the ballot, and three of them were existing board members.
Could you tell us a bit, because I know it's an
Yeah.
elected board of directors, but a lot of
Yes.
people don't realize that. Could you tell us?
Yes. So, okay. So for a bank, they just hire whoever the heck they want to join their board, and they get paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars to join the board of the bank. And it's like you have to be in that circle to even like get your name on the list. Okay. Credit unions, it's different. Any member can throw their hat in the ring to be a board member.
Mhm.
The issue is that there is a selection committee of existing board members that goes through all of those applications and whittles it down to a short list that then every member gets a ballot and can vote. That's kind of how, forgive my language here, but that's how I kind of feel that they rig it, is through that selection committee and through that short list. But I think there are paths to be able to get actual members who maybe don't have a financial background, but who maybe have lived experiences that would be really valuable, right? And to be able to get more diverse names on that short list. And then, no question, you can absolutely want to exercise your vote by voting for the board members, right? And again, it's one member, one vote, not one share, one vote, meaning that my membership actually has, my vote actually has a lot more meaning at a credit union vote than it would with a bank. Now, sometimes I've heard examples. I had someone on the chat that was like their credit union, there was a vote for CEO, and there was like only one candidate on that ballot. And like that's going to happen if you've ever been part of some of these, right? Governance structure, this can happen. And so this is why as members, but we can show up to the AGMs, we can be active members. Don't berate staff, like don't call customer service and go like you can like, but those are just people doing their job. So just like get them to take the note and send it up the flagpole. Really what you want to go after are the board members, and very specifically you can find out as part of the annual reports who the board selection committee is. And really what we need to do is really, if there was one thing for the credit unions, it's that selection committee and getting them out of their box that like you need to have an MBA or like, you know, Institute of Corporate Directors certificates, you know, in order to be an effective board member. That really we need diversity on boards, and not only of, you know, races and ages and genders, but also of experiences and also of different, you know, educational backgrounds, right? To really have true diversity on the board of directors. But I do have a friend, Andy Craig. He got on the board of directors at Alterna, and he's awesome. He works for like poverty reduction organization in Peterborough, Ontario. He's incredible, and he's on the board at Alterna, and I'm so happy that he got on it. And we need more people like him. We need more people from this audience in this talk on those boards of directors. But I'm not going to lie, it's been a source of frustration for me.
Thank
Karen,
you
I
for
see you nodding as well.
Thank you for your honesty with that. It's really helpful to not, yeah, set people up to know what to expect, and also that like we can make these pushes, and that is really powerful. And maybe people on this call will be on one of those board of directors, and that would be a big improvement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful.
Yay.
The chat's been like blowing up with thank yous for you, for Karen, for Eve. I know she's not with us anymore, but we're so grateful she could pop on last minute as she could. I love that you all had such different experience and wisdom to bring today to give like a really holistic picture of like how to approach and start thinking about this divestment work. So I'm just gonna remind everyone one more time, we are recording. I know we got a lot of questions from latecomers. This will be available online. We're gonna send out the recording to everyone who registered and include all of the resources. Like we've had so many great resources linked in the chat today, and there will be more. So we'll make sure that you get those and you have ways to follow up and follow the work of each of our speakers and get more plugged into this divestment work. And yeah, sign our pledge on our Breakup with Your Bank webpage that we shared. We'll share that again after too. And then opt in for emails from us. You know, Tim was saying it'd be great to have more people advocating at credit unions. We would really like to help people at credit unions connect who have these shared values. So they can do those pushes together collectively. We know that that's what makes it powerful, and that's what makes it a lot easier and more exciting. So yes, please do stay in touch with us. Thank you everyone for showing up today and doing this work. And thank you especially Karen and Tim.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah, such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for organizing it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Many thank yous in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.